I don't know, is it 2 years ago now, 3 years ago now, I dove into the comic pond. My first book is a book for Action Lab Entertainment called ABERRANT, which is kind of a 24 with superheroes type thing, short and sweet. ABERRANT was, I think 2 weeks before issue 2 hit the stands, optioned for television by Tony Krantz, who produced 24, which is kind of cool. That's being developed for television right now and was nominated for a couple of Ringo Awards. I find out who wins said Ringo Awards next weekend.
Nice.
At the Baltimore Comic Con.
I voted for you.
Thank you very much. Nominated for Best Writer and Best Single Issue. So
Nice.
I don't know, it's out there. Go get it. I have a couple of copies if you want to hit me up for something. And then my most recent series is a dark superhero noir kind of superhero finds out he has terminal cancer and goes on like a death wish like crusade to clean up the city before he dies. Kind of if Michael Mann directed a superhero movie, kind of interesting like that. But that dropped a couple of months ago from Action Lab Danger Zone. It's been pretty well received, so I highly recommend these books. The writer's a jerk, but they're pretty good reads.
He's very tall, though.
Yeah. Is he?
Yeah,
Oh, interesting.
He's a tall guy.
How tall is he, do you think?
He's pretty tall.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 5'6". I have no idea.
Okay.
I
You
look
think
up
like
pretty
6'4" tall? Or do you
No,
think,
he's not that tall.
No, okay.
Maybe like
Yeah.
6'1",
Okay,
6".
interesting.
Like that,
Interesting, okay.
I heard he's pretty good looking too.
Yeah, he's devastatingly handsome.
Yeah,
I've heard
well,
that.
there's that.
Yeah, that's the thing. So let me get to this panel here. This panel is born from a long tradition. So like I said, maybe about 3 years ago or so, I dove into the comic pond. 4 years ago, I was like you guys. I was sitting in panels like these, trying to figure out how the hell to do this. I'd been a working writer for a long time. I knew how to write a story, but I didn't know how to get a comic book up on its feet. And I sat in panels like this, and I got a lot of bad information, and I got a lot of good information, and I have over the last few years sort of collated it and triaged it, and I've tried to find the best people and take the best information and just give it back to you guys. So I don't know, a little bit of a shortcut. Hopefully you guys don't have to do as much work as I did. So this is a Kickstarter panel. The first thing I should admit is that I've yet to do a Kickstarter. But what I do with these panels now is that when I don't know how to do something, I'm prepping my first Kickstarter. You're probably going to see it in the next 6 months. But when I don't know how to do something, I find 5 people that are smarter than me and better than me at it, and I get them up in front of a con crowd like this, and I ask them questions. And I get a ton from it, and hopefully you guys get something from it. These guys get to show you their books, which are awesome. I do not put people on the panels that do not have awesome books, so consider this an endorsement. And so let's get into the who and the what here. Let's not do too much of the Kickstarter story, but hi, my name is, my book is, I've written these other things that you should check out, and I raised this much money on Kickstarter this many times, that sort of thing. And then we'll get into the kind of the nuts and the bolts after we go down the line. So why don't we start with you? Go ahead.
I'm David Avoloni. I've only been writing comics for about 5 years. Like Rylend, I come from the motion picture side of things as an editor and producer and writer and a bunch of other stuff that's very confusing if you look me up on IMDb. I started writing for Dynamite about 5 years ago, and through my comics, through convention going, I met Kevin Eastman, who created the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Little thing, you probably haven't heard of it. And he wanted to do a new indie thing and brought me on as a writer and co-creator of it. And we've done 2 Kickstarters for Volume 1 and Volume 2. First one raised $106,000, second one raised $120,000. That was short, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and I write Betty Page and Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, for Dynamite currently.
And he's throwing like 100 miles an hour and painting the corners of those books. So
Well, thank you.
Hi, I'm Charlie Stickney. I also worked in film and animation for a while, but then I came back to my first love, which was comics, and I kickstarted White Ash, which is a fantasy romance comic, and I raised about $130,000 on Kickstarter for White Ash, and I just launched a new series called The Game, and we're already off to a great start with that. And I did not have Kevin Eastman. So you can do it.
Hi, my name is Christy Shin. I am the writer and artist of Demon Bitch right here. So for my Kickstarter, the initial goal was $2,500. I raised $3,500. which I'm amazed it's too much for her because she's a useless piece of garbage. So, but it's a low-level demon from the 13th pit of hell where people throw their dog crap in gum wrappers, and she wants to bring the second coming of Armageddon, but the first one never happened because she's stupid. She's based off a girl I really hated. So, yeah, so it's like art imitates life. So,
Can you name names?
no, I
I'm David Schrader. I have a book called Baby Badass from Action Lab Danger Zone. I also came in the comics late. I loved them as a kid, but I did stand-up and improv and started making films and kind of got away from comics. And we had this idea for Baby Badass, so it went through this whole process. First, it was a webcomic that kind of failed, and then we pitched it as a show, and eventually I hired an artist to do the first book, and it got picked up by Action Lab. It took 2 more years for the other 2 books, so it was a gestation period from 2006 to 2018 until it got published. And then I did a Kickstarter for the next volume, and so we have issue 1 of Baby Badass Returns for this year, and then the full volume will be out next year. And we did a Kickstarter at $39.99. It was like a used car special, and we raised almost $13,000. So it was a mild success.
Hi, I'm Don Wynn. I left a very safe and secure job at a well-known think tank about 7 years ago to go after the money in comics. I wanted to be a comic book artist, so I spent my time working. I recently funded Kickstarter. It's the very first one called Pablo the Gorilla. It's about a cybernetic gorilla that delivers pizza, just wants to live his life. But unfortunately, the government that created him wants their equipment back. And he's also being hunted by something a little more sinister. My ask was $3,700, and I raised $5,601 after actually attending this very panel. So it's proof that this panel does work, and you'll get a lot of great information from it. And this is my comic, and this is the variant cover done by two-time Eisner winner Dustin Nguyen, if you guys don't know who that is.
Yeah, and I should say, again, as a guy who was sitting in these very seats, a few years back, it's always the most rewarding thing when, somebody who, again, you wanted to do a Kickstarter, you were still figuring it out.
Yep.
You were sitting in this seat not too long ago,
Yeah.
listening to, I don't know, maybe some of these same people were even on the
Yeah,
panel.
Chrissy
right?
was definitely on it.
Yeah.
Dave, Russell Nolte, who was it here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Press was on that one.
and then you went out and you just, bam, raised $6,500 or whatever. That's
awesome.
So go do that and let me know, and I'll put you on the next panel. Yeah. Cool. So this panel always works best when it turns into a conversation between you guys. We don't have to sort of keep this format of going straight down the line or anything like that. If you have something to say, go ahead and raise your hand so your friends can see it and chime in. One thing will lead to another. It works best when I stay the hell out of the way, so I'm going to try to do that. I might pop in with a question or two here and there, and I'll give you a little something here to get the ball rolling. I am going to try to leave time for questions for you guys. I always say that I'm going to do that, and then I blink, and these guys have been just spewing gold for 55 minutes, and we have to leave. If that ends up being the case again, and it probably will be, we will be right outside afterwards, and we will stand there and answer any and all questions that you have. So don't worry about that, and don't throw eggs at me or anything. So let me just start this, and you can take it or leave it. And Avoloni, why don't you get us rolling, because you're good at that sort of thing. But I just want to talk about the initial decision to crowdfund, and particularly in your case, it's interesting because you have Kevin Eastman,
Right.
And the first rule to everyone who wants to get their Kickstarter going, if you can get Kevin Eastman on board, it's a pretty good idea.
The brand recognition definitely helps. That said,
what I was going to say, but before you get rolling, is so you have Kevin Eastman. You can go anywhere. You can go to Image. You can go to Dark Horse. You can go to.
if only that were true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
the start of it was actually Kevin wanted to do a semi-autobiographical story about his crazy life as a guy who, when he was 20-something, living with a roommate, they created a black and white indie comic, printed 3,000 copies that they borrowed $1,500 from Uncle Quentin, literally, to print. And suddenly it was within a couple of years, it was $1 billion global franchise because the moment was just exactly right. And Kickstarter, I always like to say, is the Uncle Quentin of the 21st century. It's just a couple of thousand Uncle Quentins are required to do it. And but he wanted actually to make a movie or TV series out of the story. We worked on it. I wrote a pilot script. We got some sort of bad advice about selling it. It didn't sell. And a lot of people, when we turned that into a comic book and a Kickstarter and all of that, I get the question a lot from my screenwriting colleagues, I have a thing that didn't sell, should I make it a comic book? And I say, do you love comic books, and will you be satisfied if it's only a comic book? And if the answer to that is no, do not do it. You have to love it. You have to be happy with the comic book. And that's where and also, there's power in loving the comic book. Because if you love the comic book, when someone asks you to change it, to make it a movie or TV show, you can go, you know, we're good. We're happy with it. We like our thing. You can also say, yes, change the hell out of it. I don't care. You can even say that if you love it. But it's the power to say no. If there's one thing I've learned from Kevin, because he has always owned the Ninja Turtles up to about 20 years ago, at the beginning he owned them. He could say no to anything that he didn't like that version of it, he didn't like that idea. So that's an important thing to remember. Don't do this if you're not happy with comic books. If you're going to spend a year of your life and several $1,000s of your own and $100,000 or $50,000 or $5,000 of someone else's to make a thing that's a leave behind in a pitch meeting, you are wasting your time. So love it or don't do it. It's my first piece of advice. The other thing is Kevin's fan base likes funny animals fighting crime. We were writing a comic book about a midlife crisis of an artist. Those are it's like, oh, you like Bugs Bunny? Here's all that jazz. You're going to dig that, right? So they were not the natural audience for this. Because of that, we built into it a Ninja Turtles pastiche called the Radically Rearranged Ronin Ragdolls, who are cats that fight crime. When we kickstarted this successfully, we went around to comic book companies, and I won't say that we went very far, but big-name comic book companies offered us nothing for the issues we had kickstarted. Oh, we'll publish them, and we'll give you the profits, but we won't pay you for the creation of them. And they offered us $1,000 an issue for further issues, which is, for those of you who don't know the economics of the comic book industry, an artist who gets less than $150 a page is being grossly underpaid. So $1,000 a book gets you about 4 pages of a comic book without the artist starving to death. So we said, no, thank you. We self-published, and again, Kevin has had a fan club, had a website, has a couple of employees, literally a couple. And that infrastructure helped us get it into the market in the standard way. And when those 4 issues came out, we definitely had the hope that the issues would sort of self-perpetuate, and they kind of did. They sold pretty well. Not surprised that the Funny Animals Fighting Crime book outsold the Midlife Crisis book 5-1. I think we sold about 16,000 copies of the Ragdolls and about 3 to 5 of Drawing Blood issues. And then I'll wrap up. But when it came time to do volume 2, I was like, well, we could kind of take the money from selling the comic books. And everyone else said to me, no, let's just do another Kickstarter. So we did. That raised a little bit more money, $120,000 for a 4-issue trade and a 40-page special issue. And again, there are a lot of things that happened that I learned from doing it a second time, because the landscape on social media has changed. Facebook does not want anybody to see any post you have about Kickstarter, by the way. They block those. The algorithm is trying very hard to get no one to ever leave Facebook. So you have to be very tricky if you want to use social media to promote. But anyway, I'll start there.
Well, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on that. I think we're at a really interesting time in the industry right now where they're looking for so much content and they're paying less than they've ever paid before. People often, when you're trying to get into comics, you think the end all and be all is I need to get a publisher, and once I get a publisher, I'm going to be set. But the publishers, because of where the way single issue sales have gone down, they're playing the long game. They're playing, I need to build enough together to make a trade, and once I make a trade, then we're going to make our money back. So we can't really pay you much for those single issues. So there's a lot of publishers that pay next to nothing for page rates. There are a lot of publishers that don't even pay a page rate. So like all these places that you think are going to be your end goal, if I can just get published, I will be set. That's just the beginning of it. Even a place like when you look at the comic book companies, even a place like Image, if you look at their creator-owned titles, aside from ones that are being done by really huge names, they're not lasting past 6 issues because they can't afford, in terms of, to pay the people to make the books. There's not enough sales coming back. And so creators have to go far too deep in their own pockets to be able to fund these series, so they can't sustain them.
Yeah, I mean, from a creator standpoint, not to interrupt you, but just to add on top of that, I am, I am basically in the traditional publishing game now, almost exclusively, though I'm trying to build that out. I am only pitching 4-issue arcs now.
Yeah.
No, because it becomes impossible for me to make any money after those 4 issues unless it becomes some twisted mega hit or something like that.
Right. So
yeah.
I didn't want to do a 4-issue limited series. I didn't want to do 6 issues. I didn't want to do 12. I have this book plotted out for about 80 issues, which is not what I would recommend to anyone starting out do, but I'm insane. That said, you figure out how to make it into sizable chunks when you put it out, but I wanted to make something that could sustain itself. So I figured a way where if I could fund it on Kickstarter, it would then give me something I could take to publishers. And so I've just signed a deal with Scout Comics that will be putting this into comic book shops, but I'm also going to be kickstarting future issues. So I'm going to be getting the best of both worlds in that I'm going to have a publishing deal, it's going to be out there, we're going to build a fan base, but I can afford to keep making the book. And if it wasn't for Kickstarter, I wouldn't be able to afford making it, again, unless it was at Image and it was a huge hit, past about 12 issues if I was lucky. So that's the why. It's the economics. And for me, it was just a much smarter choice to see if I could make it succeed on Kickstarter than anything else.
And let me just hit that point again right on the head, is that I would say even if you were sitting in this panel a year ago, we would have been talking about the traditional publishing route and the Kickstarter route being completely separate worlds. And the wall between those two worlds is really breaking down now. Where you have people like Charlie who are taking their Kickstarter books, getting them, traditional publishers. David Schrader again. You started out with Action Lab. You wanted to do a second series, and so you then went from Action Lab to Kickstarter, and you're going back to Action Lab. And so there's this dance that's going on right now, which is really beautiful. And really, it's just the publishers realizing that they have to, that they're 5 years behind and that they need to get with it. But yeah.
Well, for me, I'm pretty much a relative unknown. Like, I don't have a background in film, per se. But, I've studied film, and I know a lot of people in film, but for me, it was just more like, I just wanted to draw what I wanted to draw. And I kind of went going from the artist perspective as well, because you're rejected a lot. You're rejected. You're told, I think at the beginning, they say, you draw great. And then they tell you, oh, guess what? It's good, not good enough. Oh, could you draw it like this? You'll make a lot of money. My own mom tells me I should draw Hello Kitty. I'll make a lot of money. Yeah, right. And then I think then people then recognize and then see your own talent, and then they start coming towards you. But the thing is, it is hard. And as an artist, the thing is, I didn't know exactly how big my fan base was with Demon Bitch. So I did the thing where I did her first book, which was Hellfire and Damnation. I just consistently put it out there once every week as a webcomic. And all the pages are from the webcomic plus some extra stuff. But it was just to grow the fan base, because I had done a Kickstarter before, but I f***ed up and it didn't fund. So this time I actually did. So I just did it for a year to kind of put the IP out there. And then I sort of was talking about it a month ahead of time, like, hey, I'm going to do a Kickstarter. I'm going to release it on this day. But then I planned everything out on my Kickstarter. But I just did, okay, realistically, when I sold this book, how much did I need to get at this point, and how much was it going to be, and all the time frames and all that other stuff. But it's just being told no all the time. I just kind of went, okay, whatever. And I just kept doing my thing. Now I'm getting more yes. But, it's not an easy road. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't be open to, I would say, constructive criticism, but go with what kind of works with you. And just understand no one will give you anything unless you're a proven, quantified talent. I mean, people ask me like, well, how'd you get this and how'd you get that? It's like, well, you need to build up your reputation. You need to build up what you do. And so people know you. People will give money if they know you. And you're thinking, well, it's Kickstarter, it's all over the world. They'll get to know you through your posts. They'll get to know you through your interactions. But, you know, you just got to start from somewhere and continue to be persistent about it. That's how I've been. And I've never waited for a publisher. I'm not saying that I wouldn't like it if that happened. That'd be great. But at this moment, I'm not looking at that right now. It's just putting out my own content. You're going to like it type thing.
And let me hit this on the head again, and then maybe you and some of the other folks can comment on this. It was the big revelation of starting to do these panels. Was I had always looked at Kickstarter as just a source of cash. It was a place you go to for capital, but all of these creators, they talk about it as if it's like another social media platform. It is a fan base builder. If you're totally right in that it helps completely to have a fan base to take on to Kickstarter, yeah. But you will find and grow your fan base on Kickstarter by doing Kickstarters. Like Charlie, you've done 5 now?
6.
6, and how has the backer rate grown over that?
So my backer rate, I have about 750 loyal backers, I would say at this point, because my 5th Kickstarter was for a trade. There wasn't, everyone didn't come because a lot of them had the single issues, but we still had 600 plus people who got the trade, and a lot of them had gotten the other ones. And then I just launched a new comic which had nothing to do with White Ash. And still, we ended up with about close to 600 people who came over to the new book. And I don't have a huge Facebook following. I have, I've built up to 1,000 people on Twitter, but that's not a lot by anybody's standards. And yet, I have a Kickstarter following, and these people like what I put out on Kickstarter. And I actually just did a survey because I'm trying to figure out my next Kickstarter. And I had 270 responses to a survey I had put out in Kickstarter within 8 hours.
It's crazy.
Which, I don't answer any surveys.
So
I like for things I like a lot. And these people are just writing big long things about what they would like to see in the next White Ash, and I don't know any of these people.
How many backers for Kickstarter #1?
312.
Okay, 312, and that is a very good number for a first Kickstarter. And now you have 750.
Yeah, and of that 312, I would say 100 of them were people I knew.
Yeah.
Of the first one, and then now most of those people are people I don't.
Yeah, and so and so there is this discussion to be had about how we sort of blow past monetizing our friendships, yeah. our familial relationships, and actually build a fan base.
In the sense that people saw that the first Kickstarter had been funded. Less than a year later, it was in stores. They could buy it at their local comic book store, and I think when we did Kickstarter 2, they went, these guys are doing great. They don't, and also very few, and this is what I actually tested the Facebook thing. I would say the first Kickstarter was maybe 250 of my friends, demonstrably, visually, maybe 30 for the second Kickstarter.
Yeah,
and
wow.
I think part of that was, he's doing great. He's got 3 books on the stands. What is he asking me for money for? But I think the other part of it, I wrote a post about the Kickstarter without using the word Kickstarter or any external links. I said to my friends on Facebook, have you seen the thing I've been talking about for the past 20 days? Have you interacted with the thing? And of my friends who are in the comic book industry, they all said yes. Of my friends who are not in the comic book industry, they all said no. So Facebook's algorithm was feeding it to the people who honestly didn't need to see it because they already knew about it, and hiding it from the people who all donated to the first one. So that's just something, maybe call it the thing.
Zuckerberg.
A couple of posts.
All right.
Yeah, Zuckerberg.
What do you have for us, David?
Just to comment on what you're saying, you should love what you're putting out there, and I would suggest starting small. Family and friends is really important. No one actually likes doing it, but you'll get people that will do it, and then make sure they're doing it early. That first 3 days is really important. This is just practical information. Like, make sure that first day, that first 3 days that you make a splash. You might get into Kickstarter's algorithm, so it's one of the projects they like, and you can build from that. And just know there's going to be a dead zone in the middle, no matter what, no matter who you are.
A
giant dead zone, and so
giant.
save some tears and some surprises for that, so you can post on social media, calling it the thing, and having some things in the middle of that to keep it going, because otherwise you're just kind of beating your head against the wall saying, hey, give to my Kickstarter, give to my Kickstarter. The people that are going to give already gave first, and then the other people are going to wait till the end anyhow.
Yeah.
So there's just that middle ground, and if you start small with your expectations, it always looks good when you go over. So if you fund the first day, like, those are great things. You see people sometimes, and they're just stretching too far. They're asking for maybe like 30,000, and they get maybe 10,000 in the first week, and that seems great. But then they're just stuck at like 12 or 13, and they're sweating it, and that can be problematic. So make sure that you keep your expectations somewhat lower and exceed them, and make sure you deliver the book. Like, if it's something you love, you're going to do a good job. I've seen people get ghosted on Kickstarters, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, they raise money and they just like drop the ball. You'll never get anyone to give to you again. But if you deliver a good book and a good product and go that extra step. For instance, for this Kickstarter, there was a guy that he pointed out a mistake we had on our Kickstarter, and I said, oh, thanks for pointing that out. I'll give you an extra book that you weren't going to get, and I'll sign them. He's like, oh, that's great. So when it came down to fulfillment, which everyone knows here, if you're doing it yourself, it's a nightmare. I forgot. He writes me this email. I was like, you know what? I was really disappointed. I got the book, and like, it wasn't signed, and like, he was kind of ranting, and I was like, hey, I could tell this guy, hey, take it easy, dude. It's just, it's just a comic book. But what I said is, I'm really sorry. I'm going to make this up to you, and I'll for sure I'll get you, and I'm going to give you an extra book, a variant copy, and I'll sign them all. And he's like, wow, that's great customer service. Thank you so much. And like, it was just a simple interaction. It cost me another comic book, but that's a guy that maybe follow the other Kickstarters that you do, and plan long term that you're going to be a brand unto yourself. It's not just one project. It's you as a writer or an artist doing multiple projects over a long period of time. And hopefully, a unionized Kickstarter.
and that's what Charlie has really established. Again, with 6 Kickstarters, I mean, you have a base that, I mean, they trust you. You have treated them they like your material, they like your customer service, and I mean, as long as you're not inundating them with stuff, every time you have something to bring them, they're going to listen, and they're most likely going to donate.
I think that there's there's doing one Kickstarter and trying to build a model where you can sustain Kickstarters to build something, and those are two very different things. Because if you're just doing one, you're going to hit friends and family, and you're going to go crazy. If you're planning to do a sustained Kickstarter, you really have to sort of have a business plan. You have to figure out how you're going to interact with people. And I'll tell you right now, the bar for customer service on Kickstarter is very low. The fact that I respond to people within 12 hours, they're always shocked.
Yeah.
And like if someone's like, hey, this comic Kang mangled, I was like, okay, I'm going to send you a replacement. They're like, you don't want pictures? I'm like, no. It's like first of all, you paid for an overpriced Kickstarter comic. I love my comic, but you were paying $15 to get an issue of my comic on Kickstarter. I'm going to send you another one for free because it got crumpled, and that goes a long way. I think it's really important to remember these are people. If you reach out to them, there's lots of ways to build your audience in between Kickstarters, and that's a whole nother topic. I can talk to people afterwards about it because I want to pass it down.
Well,
but building in between Kickstarters, if you want to sustain Kickstarters, is really the key to multiple Kickstarters.
Yeah, well, let's go down to Don, and Don and I talked on the phone for Don is one of these things. I a couple of times a year I meet somebody and I'm like, okay, well, Don was going to be on the panel, and we kind of knew each other, but we didn't know each other. We hadn't shaken hands. Like I watched, I respected his game for a long time. And so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get on the phone with Don, and I'll just carve out 10 minutes for this, and then 2 hours go by, and like we're still ranting about old movies and stuff like that. So Don and I very quickly had a bromance.
Yes. Beautiful.
But piggybacking on something that Schrader said, you had some really interesting things to say about the launch, about sort of hacking the algorithm and how important that can be and everything like that?
It's extraordinarily important. I've been a part of 2 other Kickstarters. One was for I was helping a friend he wanted $100,000 to do a short film and a graphic novel, which is a huge ask. He actually hit $16,000, I believe, in funding, so he would have had the graphic novel done, but the short film was like his big sell. And then I had another friend who asked for $30,000 to do a short film, and he put me onto the game of a Kickstarter. Just a show of hands, how many of you are actually almost prepped to do a Kickstarter? Just a few? And then how many of you are looking or thinking about doing a Kickstarter? Everybody? Okay. So one of the tricks is Kickstarter looks at 3 main zones of activity, right? So the first one is the first 24 hours are extraordinarily critical to getting attention. So in that first 24 hours, your algorithm has to hit like every impressionable count possible. And if you guys are launching a Kickstarter, if you ask people who run Kickstarters, they'll tell you it's about a month of prep. And they're not kidding. It is about a month of prep to like get things in place, to figure out how much things are going to cost. Kickstarter has fantastic videos and resources that will guide you through that. But the thing that they don't tell you is that you need backers right away, like in the first 24 hours. And out of those backers, they need to have activity. So as soon as the person backs, they need to be excited about backing you, so they need to leave comments. So one of my preps and talking and sitting on these panels, the thing that I took away, and I talked to my friend who did the short film, because I didn't know about the first 24 hours, I didn't know about the dead zone, and I didn't know about the last 48 to 72 hours, is you need minimal activity in the dead zone, you need a huge amount of activity up front, and a huge amount of activity towards the back end. So I reached out, and everybody's talking about friends and family is your first line of attack. You need to reach out to those people first, and that should be part of your strategy. If, unfortunately, you're at odds with your family for whatever reason, then rely on as many close friends as possible to get the word out there. And that means, like, even if they can only back at $1, once they back, the comment section opens up, tell them to go and comment on that, and then share it. If you can't back, that's fine. Do, the thing that we all ask you to do, which is share about the project, talk about the project. If you have any questions about the project, ask us. We'd love to answer the questions, because when you start a Kickstarter, you have to be open to everything, and you make yourself open and available to answering questions and talking about that. One of the selling points for Pablo the Gorilla, and one of the inspirations, is actually Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The way I sold the book is I kept telling people I'm not saying it's going to be the next Ninja Turtles, but I'm not saying it's going to be the next Ninja Turtles. So that was kind of my in on selling it to family and friends, but I can't emphasize enough like reaching out to people. And that doesn't mean just going on Facebook. Part of my plan of attack was I had everything tiered out. So I did an email outreach first. I started building a newsletter. Russell, unfortunately, who isn't here, was one of the few people. And this guy, Jeff Ryder, who does Cloud Wrangler Comics, if you've gone to some cons, you might have met him. He and Russell were like, you have to have a newsletter. And my newsletter, even though it's not very large, I only have about 80 people on it, I still got about 15 to 20% return of people who backed my Kickstarter just from that. So every little bit counts, and you want to reach out and get that. So remember to email your family and friends and text them too, if it comes down to it. Yeah. And the thing you have to think about, I know a lot of people have that roadblock in their minds, like, I don't like begging for money, and I thought that way too, but the bigger picture is you are building an audience. And it's not just about reaching through your friends and family, and if you're thinking, I'm going to take advantage of it, it's about getting a new audience, making your family aware that you're doing this, or your friends aware that you're doing this, and hopefully they're excited about it too, and they share it with other people within their audience. So networking is a huge and critical part to the success of a Kickstarter. And then the other thing I have to say is, sitting on this panel, the thing that I take away from you guys and a lot of other people who've run Kickstarters is be prepared to fail. Yeah. I feel like failure, I think 37% of Kickstarters successfully fund, or crowdfunding in general, is what they say. So expect to be part of the other 60%. I think that's the best way to go into it. And failure does not mean that you fail completely. Failure means that you're setting up and gearing up to succeed. It's one of those, like, every no brings you closer to that yes kind of a door. And the reason for that is because in talking to people who failed at Kickstarter, especially in their first time, they find that super backers will come in and tell them what they may have possibly done wrong, what they could improve upon. And that means somebody out there is lurking and paying attention to you, which is huge.
Right.
You know what's interesting too, like even 5 months after my Kickstarter successfully funded, I'll have people randomly follow me. And by all means follow them back, because you kind of put yourself in that network of like supporting the other person. Like even like last month I had major surgery. I couldn't really like help or back people, but some of my friends were like, hey, you know, I have a Kickstarter, so I at least share it on my page. Like even sharing it is appreciated, or retweeting it or something. Or if they say, hey, can you help me on this? I said, well, I can do this, you know. Don't go beyond what you can't do, but by all means do what you can. Like even the little things are very appreciated in the community as well.
Like most Kickstarters will have a tier that's like $1 or something. So you don't want to go on Kickstarter and say you're going to launch something, and they look at you and you back no one.
Right.
Like that's just number one. Go back some projects. Back projects that you like. Back projects that are in the same realm of your project, and you meet people that way, but they see that you backed other people, and you can back for $5, $1, whatever. There's this one guy, he shows up on my emails all the time. He backs everything, and I think we might all know his name. But I'm like, wow, this guy, he's like some wealthy billionaire that's just backing every Kickstarter that ever comes out. But back other people, and also one last practical note is when you launch is important. So do a soft launch, say like the weekend before, but launch officially like on a Tuesday. I've heard, like, is that the best time of the week to do your launch?
Wednesday.
It's like it's not Monday. It's the week has started. People are paying attention, and there's a time too. But you know, do that prep work, like Don said. Like tell all your friends and family, text them, call them. Just make sure you get a big push initially, and then you do it like around the right time of the week.
And Kickstarter is a community. I 100%. You back your friends.
Yes.
Charles and I did a cross promotion during my last Kickstarter and his last Kickstarter, which was pretty successful. And this is something, it doesn't necessarily apply to every project, but whatever it is that your project is about or touches on or is like, I go on Facebook groups dedicated to science fiction, dedicated to the Ninja Turtles, dedicated to pulp adventure when I'm doing something like that. Join those groups. Become part of the community of fans who will be interested in your stuff. You do have to tread lightly. If people get the impression that you're doing something just to get money out of them, your first post in the fan group shouldn't be, hey everybody, here's my Kickstarter. It should be, oh, I also like that episode of Star Trek. Or whatever you think is I write the Elvira and Betty Page books, as I mentioned earlier. I spend 15 to 20 minutes of every day on Instagram looking at the Betty Page and Elvira hashtags. And I find the people reading the book. And I find people who like it. And I don't, like, if someone has bangs, I'm like, hey, you should read my Betty Page comic. You have bangs. You know, again, it requires a certain degree of finesse greater than your bangs are just like my comic book character. But you look and find the ways. The only convention I've ever been the guest of honor at was a Doc Savage convention, because I wrote a Doc Savage comic. I joined the Doc Savage fan group on Facebook, and they said, we have a yearly convention that's a bunch of 70-year-old men, and we'd love to have you out in Phoenix for our convention. And it's just because I wanted to find the people who love the thing I was working on, so I found them. And yes, that works. It's easier when it's licensed characters, real people, whatever. But if you're writing a fantasy, there are fantasy groups. If you're writing science fiction, there are science fiction groups. If you're writing urban noir, there's urban noir groups. Those people are out there across all social media. And related to that also, I would say, and there are podcasts, thousands upon thousands of podcasts. They are all desperate for guests. When I was writing a Twilight Zone book, I found the 2 Twilight Zone podcasts, and I went on both of them. Did I sell a single comic book? I have no idea. And you'll never know. But again, if you're writing a fantasy, if you're writing a superhero thing, I swear to God, there's a guy with a fantasy podcast who needs a guest that week.
You're hitting on this interesting thing where both the comics business and the Kickstarter world, they are ecosystems. Yeah. One feeds, one person is feeding, they're playing their role. And so you guys kind of all need each other, you guys need to prop each other up in the Kickstarter world, right? You promote his thing and blah 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 blah, and you know, you retweeting his campaign, that goes back and forth. That's very interesting. Yeah, and then the comics business in general works like that because
very small world.
yeah, well, artists need writers to write things, and writers need artists to draw things, and it's like you're saying, the podcasters need guests desperately, and we need places to promote our books, and the fan base that is rabid for sci-fi or Twilight Zone or whatever, they desperately want content, and so we all feed each other, and we live in this beautiful information age where there are places we can all go to meet.
Yeah.
Well, I think once you become part of the community, and it is really important to become part of the Kickstarter community. I think I've backed close to 200 projects, but don't tell my wife, please. But
You know this is being videoed, right?
it becomes easier as you go forward to Kickstart series once you've reached a certain saturation level, because you have people who are out there promoting you that you don't have to do the work for. I'll be perfectly honest, I have progressively worked less and less promoting my Kickstarters as they have gone on, and they fund faster and faster. Because the minute my Kickstarter launches, I have people who have other campaigns and other fan bases saying, hey, you got to check out, Charlie's got a new Kickstarter for White Ash, or my new book, The Game, and it just makes it a lot easier for you. But if it's your first Kickstarter, what David was saying, when Don was saying, it really is important to manufacture that day one surge. And so when you write to your family or friends, it's not back my Kickstarter, it's my Kickstarter is launching at 9 a.m. on Monday or Tuesday. I need you to please just back, if you know, whatever you can. If it's $1, it's $10, it's $25, because that's what's going to get Kickstarter's algorithm to go. Because Kickstarter is an amplifier more than it's the end all and be all. So whatever you're going to bring to it, you're kickstarting your own Kickstarter, if you look at it that way. And for my first campaign, 92 or 3% of the people who backed it on day one were my friends and family. Probably going the rest of the way, it was 80% people I didn't know. Going forward, like for my second campaign, the day one was probably about 20% friends and family, but I funded within 30 hours, and I had a higher ask for my second one.
And and let me just hit on the head again, like how important a community of creators is, how important it is to kind of get with like-minded people who are all headed in the same direction. Because you said, Charlie, kind of like, almost disparaging yourself, like, oh, well, I only have 1,000 Twitter followers, but that's not exactly true, because on this stage you have 15,000 Twitter followers, because when you launch a Kickstarter and you tweet out, immediately it's retweeted by everybody up here, and Charlie he's a great guy and everybody loves him. So Charlie has 30 people just like us who retweet his thing. So Charlie has, I don't know, 50,000 people, 50,000 Twitter followers that are gonna get that put in front of them, and that is where a campaign succeeds or fails. Is that sort of so get with people who are doing the same thing and just help each other, prop each other up, because this is very much a team sport. One person cannot win the Super Bowl. It takes 52 guys and a group of coaches and trainers and the whole 9 yards. What do you got?
My other hot tip is make sure you have a finished product. You don't believe how far that'll go. So don't start a Kickstarter. Go, I have 15 pages of this 40-page book done.
Yeah.
Try to finish it up. When I launched my Kickstarter, I have a much smaller base probably than anybody here. I started attending cons and tabling at cons in 2018, and I had real anxiety about running a Kickstarter and like reaching into my base. But one of the things I want to make sure I had that I learned from all of these guys and learned from other Kickstarter panels and crowdfunding panels I sat on was have a finished product. You don't know how far that will go. The only thing I had to worry about on my Kickstarter is what would happen at the printers, getting in line with Dustin Wynn's schedule so that he could do our variant cover for us.
Yeah.
And then I had 2 artists doing pinups that are in the book. And other than that, all my work on my side was done. So I let my backers know off the bat, hey, these are the only issues we're going to encounter. Because there is a section for that. I don't know if you guys have already backed Kickstarters, but there's a section where you can tell people what to expect, what problems might arise or come up. And if any problem comes up, everybody has said it so far, Kickstarter backers, crowdfunder backers are amazing at being understanding just keep them updated, keep them informed on every step of the process that I would say is major. I try not to blast updates out like every week.
Yeah.
I think up to this point, I maybe only have 6 updates, and they're all key moments on the project. For example, one of my books, I caused a glitch in the matrix. The printer couldn't figure out the error, had to send it back to the software manufacturer and the press manufacturer.
Oh, wow.
And I let my backers know that. So next week is when I'm going to start packing and sending out my backer packages. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Did you really cause a glitch in the matrix?
I apparently did, yeah. The credit section was so warbled that they took it, and I looked at it because I had the original proof, so I could go, hey, you guys sent me a proof, and it doesn't look like this.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we don't know what's going on. Let's see what happens. So if you're an artist, this is something that they'll do, is they rasterize and flatten every layer of my image that was messed up, ran it back through the software, and it got messed up again.
Oh,
Yikes.
dang.
So then it took 2 extra days and an extra week and a half to destroy 2,000 comics and reprint them.
Oh,
So big thanks to SGX Printing. If you're watching this, I really appreciate the work you guys did. The book looks fantastic.
Quick interjection too. Like if you're just starting out and you're like, well, I do Facebook Lives and stuff. This is not going to be a big thing. And some people also get into the mistaken thing. I'm doing my Kickstarter, I'm busy. Now that's true to a point. And it's like, well, you know, I'm running my Kickstarter. Don't view it as a competition thing. Like a lot of times what saved me, or not really saved me, but I would just talk to other creators that were running a Kickstarter, said, you want to go on my lunch hour? All I do is sit around and bullshit, and I draw, and people watch me. And I'm like, that's fine. And then so I would ask them, hey, you running a Kickstarter? I'm running a Kickstarter. Why don't we do this? I'll talk about mine, you talk about yours. We just talk about our work. We just talk about life. And, you know, if people see you as a real person, you'll get a lot more hits.
Yeah.
Now, and also figure out your dead zones. Mine were weekends because people are out with their families. Lastly, I think one of the things that I wanted to touch upon, and it just went out of my head, but I think, so just essentially like work together to get your goals. You all want to
Yeah.
go and have your
Yeah.
stuff funded. Don't be that jerk off in the Kickstarter where like, I can't do anything else. Like you can say no to certain things because it is a very busy and very mentally consuming thing. But if there's another person running a Kickstarter, you can reach their audience and they can reach yours.
Right.
So.
But don't
Yeah.
spam them.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
spam
Sometimes you see
them.
that where
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I got a Kickstarter, I've never backed anything you've done, and they're just like sending stuff out. Don't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
We've
Use
all
some
kind of
spreadsheet.
touched on this, but I want to put it in the starkest black and white terms. In the first 24 to 48 hours, you will get 33% of the total. In the last 40 hours, you will get 33% of the total. That leaves 26 to 27 days where you're getting $5 a day or $100 a day or whatever the minimum thing that you're dealing with is. Those days are brutal. And anything that you can plan in the middle, we did some live draws. We did auctions of original art pieces that did really well during our downtime. We did a comic book shop appearance where we signed comics of Volume 1. If you have any pre-existing thing, this is great. And Golden Apple allowed us to do a thing where everyone who wanted to come in and get their comic signed had to prove that they had donated to the Kickstarter. Had to show on their phone or had to, you know, give money that we would then funnel into the Kickstarter. So there are a lot of ways to keep the thing alive in that brutal 26 to 27 days. But it was, you know, the old expression, it's not a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's a sprint, and then it's a marathon, and then it's a sprint, and then it's a marathon, and then it's a sprint.
Oh.
It's complicated.
And then it's a wrestling match.
It's a wrestling
Yeah.
match, and
With a drunken biker.
wrapped
Yeah.
in an enigma with
Yeah.
Cool Whip on the top. But
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
no, but that, yeah, that's all. I just think it's important to. A lot of people enter, and those first 48 hours can be really giddy, and you go, "Oh my God, we're making $1,000 an hour! This is amazing!" Oh, we're making nothing, you know, and it happens very quickly.
Just keep like an emotional like level. But
Yeah.
another
Or
thing.
drink. That's what I do.
Double the pain.
Well, also another thing about the Kickstarter that I also want to point out, because I see a lot of people fail at this, is that they will not fulfill it in a timely fashion. Now the thing is that your prints are going to be done. Like figure out what's going to be done first,
Yeah.
and if that's going to complete the first order, send that out first. Just because, you know, I've seen people wait up to the very end and it's like, hey, where's all my stuff? It's like, but I have all these things. Just stage your stuff. Like, if you get your prints first, send it to all the people that just bought the print.
It's really good to have a digital reward that you can send out immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too.
Get those
Yeah,
out of the
too.
way.
Like,
Also
it's
advertising.
over, here's the thing, here's at least part of the thing. We
Yeah.
just emailed it to you. It's free
Yeah.
to do that.
All right,
To add
yeah.
on to
Someone's
that real
time.
quick, it's
Last comment here.
Also, like, have a package so you can send out like a package that's this size. Some people do these posters or original art or whatever, and that's fine for maybe just a couple. But if you have like massive tiers and you're doing oblong boxes, and packaging is going to eat you up, and
Yeah.
postage is going to eat you up. So keep it like comic book size for maybe a trade, another comic book, stickers, buttons,
Yeah.
things like that that can
Flat
fit
fees are
inside
good.
that one.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right.
and,
So-
don't launch in or around holidays.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
a big
Yeah,
pro
people
tip.
will ignore
All
you.
right, so we'll be outside for questions. I want to go down the line one last time because a lot of these guys are tabling and have wares and fairs available. Just to hit again, my Ringo-nominated opus Aberrant is available in fine comic book shops everywhere. Amazon, Comixology, the whole 9 yards. Same thing with BANJAX, superhero noir, fit of craziness and loveliness. Give it to us.
David Avoloni, it's an uncommon name, so I'm very easily found on all the social medias. Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and Betty Page come out every month for the next 2-3 months, and then we'll relaunch. And Drawing Blood, all of these are on, that's the comic with Eastman, that's on Comixology. There'll be a trade coming out pretty soon, but your comic book shop might have back issues.
Charlie Stickney. For the rest of today, I'll be down in the Comic Bug Pavilion in B9 in Artist Alley. And got White Ash will be coming out from Scout Comics starting in January. But I also will have another Kickstarter that I'm probably going to launch in November and go through some of the brutal holidays. So I will be doing everything you shouldn't be doing, so don't follow my lead.
That's brave.
Christy Shin of Horror Studios. I'll be having, I don't have very many copies of Demon Bitch left, so that's what I've got, but I've got other books. But I'm in the same aisle as these guys, so it's 100B, aisle 100, letter B as in bitch, if you want to look at that way. So I've got cards, if you guys can go and take that. That also will have my website with social media links on it as well.
Cool. Real quick, guys. They're booting us out. So.
I'm at the same place, B6 and Artist Alley, Baby Badass and The Baby Badass on Instagram and Twitter.
I'm at A24, like the studio. I'm actually behind these guys, and you can find me on social media at Winning It. Super.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you outside.